Yeah, it does feel like there's a very wide range of different cocktails, all designed to be horrendous.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I just feel like the problem figures really dominate.
Oh yeah, like I said, there's a lot of cocktails. It's like going to a really fancy bar. Like it'll all get you messed up. But I like how many different ways of getting messed up there are there at the moment. I would rather have a casual night with friends. But
yeah, I mean, if you take in any given archetype, like there's how many different variations of do stuff after Taxi? Like what you played your shield team on Friday.
Yeah.
Josafa had unthemed with Micron and Jason Wingard, and then you can do Medusas, and there's just even that one team idea has a lot of executions. I kind of see where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah,
I miss casual Heroclix, and so I've started to take
from today. Actually.
I'm starting to take like the online competitive rock tournaments and just start playing casually stuff. Like I already am kind of in that vicinity, and I just keep leaning more into it because I find I would rather lose with a team that I like playing than feel like I have to play a team I don't want to in order to be competitive. And the more that I don't have a casual outlet, the more true that becomes.
Yeah, I mean, again, that falls under the same reason I'm going to be playing 300-point Dr. Doom when he's out there. It's just like, I just want to have fun, man. I just want to remember what it's like to enjoy this stuff.
Yeah. I also have to get Immortal Hulk out of my system because he's one of the few figures I actually have in hand. And also, he's not a casual figure, so he has to get played one way or the other.
Mm.
All right, so we're actually live right now.
How long have we been live? I figured it was going to happen.
About a quarter second after I said I'm hitting the button.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Tom was being too interesting.
Tom,
yeah.
I slightly interrupted Tom in the middle of it, but I didn't want him to stop.
No, I had my eye on the clock. I figured you'd be doing something like that.
Yeah. Tom's actually starting to get used to it now. I'm going to start warning you guys, just so you guys don't talk about anything of particular.
Hopefully no swears come out in the middle of
I mean, I do hit the not for children, but we passed the first minute yet, so.
Yeah, I heard there was something now where if you swear within the first 3 minutes, you're like more likely to get demonetized if it's for kids, or I can't remember.
Well, I suspect we already fall into the category of not of great interest to children, so I mean, why bother?
And I do get a little button that says not intended for children, I swear.
Yeah, and this game is for 14 plus.
And I'm wearing this shirt, so
Isaac is cheating. So
is this game actually for 14 plus?
That's what it says on the box.
On the box, it says intended for 14 plus. Intention is never. I mean, have you ever played on Xbox Live? And most of the games that are online are rated M.
Yeah, plus the words coming out of those kids' mouth. That
made me go, what? So we're not joined this week by Mike. There's not much in the way of news as far as the game Heroclix is concerned. We do have a lot more confirmation that May 27th, the things that we're expecting are going to come out. Apparently, the Justice... I might have read this wrong, but it's a Justice League Unlimited starter actually delayed till July. Did I hear that right?
Let me pull up this. I don't see why it would be. I'm pulling up this.
I might have heard incorrectly or read incorrectly on somebody's post on Facebook. But I do know the actual Justice League Unlimited set and Fantastic Four starter set are going to be coming out 27th, along with the Black Widow movie set.
Yeah, Booster Brick, starter set, release date, Dyson Token all says May 27th.
Right, so there's a whole lot of stuff coming out on the 27th. So that's going to be it's not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, which is exciting news. Stuff's coming again. It's hard to get out there and play with people, but it's coming.
Right, exactly.
So it's that whole, it's something. It's not everything, but it's something. And we'll take what we can get for now.
Gotta scratch that opening boosters itch.
Yeah. Oh, man, I might actually just do another unboxing video just for it. Just like, hey, guys, we got some more product. Why not? Let's just enjoy it.
Just show off your Doom again just because you can.
I mean, why not? I'm going to get another Doom. I'm getting another one of the... we're about to lose connection.
Of course.
I'm looking at OBS going, no, I'm not showing you anything that you're doing. It's not going to happen. I'm just waiting for it. It's seconds away. Either that or I'm sorry, but I paused the video paused on like the worst possible picture. We're gonna just keep going and see how this all ends up.
Sure.
Yeah. So maps, another thing we're gonna be talking about this week. All right, there it goes. This seems to be back in action now. I wonder how much of that got seen by people.
Yeah, I've heard most Heroclix games are actually played on maps.
Yeah, they're a big requirement for the game. And we have 4 new maps to talk about this week. So last week, if you're here, we caught up on the Justice League Unlimited starter set maps. This week, we're going to go on the other starter set that's coming out soon. I love that there's 2 starter sets coming out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. A big injection of new maps, a bunch of new sort of new things to get excited about. It's really quite cool.
Starter sets are so good.
More powers and abilities cards, so you guys can keep stealing them off me. Not you guys specifically, but everybody else in the world who keeps stealing them. You know who you are. You know who you are. Those things, you swear they were printed on gold, the amount of heists that have been pulled by mine and then been stolen. Anyway, yeah.
Well, the problem is people don't read them to begin with.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. For the longest time, there weren't that many. And I remember last year, my big thing was like, can we get more starter sets so we can get more players? Now we got 2 coming out in the same day. It's like, all right, cool.
That's great. No matter what you're a fan of,
yeah, pretty much. Unless you just hate happiness.
Well, yes. Unless you wanted to play a tabletop game on top of a table, in which case I guess you're going to have to wait a little longer. But at least you'll have the set for it.
I mean, yeah, a couple new players came into Dolly's, and they were telling me they were playing with like Warhammer rules and using the movement as measurement. And I was like,
whoa,
you're brave. And then they
mean?
started using D&D maps apparently. So anyway,
wow.
At length, we've talked about everything but maps, and I'm sure Tom, you're all set up. You are the man that runs the Cartographer's Corner.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. I've put together another little slideshow for us here to take a look at the.
I just realized that you should have a jingle ready for that the segment, because that's all we're going to be doing just when maps happen.
We'll figure it out. Give it time. We'll need Mike for that. He's our resident musician when I'm not. So for today, we're going to talk about the maps that come in the starter set for the Fantastic Four. Now, much like the starter for JLU, the Fantastic Four one does come with 4 maps, so there's 4 new interesting things for us to talk about. Unlike the JLU, to the best of my knowledge, I believe only 2 of them have special rules. That is right? It's not that there's something missing? Okay, good.
Yeah, I brought him downstairs this time, so yes, can confirm only 2 of them have location bonuses.
Brilliant. Well, let's jump right into the ones that do then. We're going to start things off with, is it Doom Castle or Castle Doom?
Doom's Castle Outdoor.
Oh, okay. Online it said
a bunch of those names
Castle,
really
and I'm like, Doom Castle can't be right. It's called Castle Doom.
It should be Doomstad, but
anyway, it's okay. So it's Doom's Castle. I call it Castle Doom. I don't care. Here's what the map looks like on your screen right now for your delectation. This indeed does have a location bonus, and one of the unique things they're doing with the location bonuses for this set is that there is the capacity to get it for 0 points under a certain circumstance. So in the case of this one, it's a 5-point location bonus like they all are, or 0 points if every character on your starting force has the Latveria keyword. For those keeping track, it doesn't say how many force. It doesn't have to be a Latveria theme team. It doesn't say how many. So yes, solo Doom in his castle is absolutely a play. The location
thing.
The location bonus is called Reign of Terror, and it reads as follows: at the beginning of the game, choose a friendly character. Once per turn, when that character rolls for leadership, you may re-roll the result. If that character is named Dr. Doom, they increase their roll for leadership by +1. Nice and straightforward. The constellation is a variation of that, as you would expect. Once per game, when a friendly character would roll for leadership, they automatically succeed. So it's a very interesting location bonus because it is one that doesn't simply have a constellation that's a weaker version of the main one. It's a slightly varied version. I'm going to talk a little bit about the map, and then we'll come back to the location bonus and different things about it. But just keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward, that when you win the map and you play on this map, then you can re-roll your leaderships. And if you're Dr. Doom, you have a slightly greater chance of your leadership succeeding. But the constellation absolutely has its uses as well, and they go be above and beyond simply being a weaker version of same. The map itself, lots of blocking terrain, as you can see. Much like a lot of the location bonuses, they have to have these corners of big blocking, so they've got somewhere to put all the text. It is a castle-type design with a little rounded bit of elevated terrain that goes around a center courtyard. This particular center courtyard has a large bit of blocking in the very middle of it, and you can see that there are lots of little blocking individual squares, matriculation style things along the upper part of the castle. So the flow of line of sight is not quite so consistent. What you will see, though, is there's lots of ways to get up and down. There is spotted bits of hindering, a little bit in the courtyard below and a little bit along the edge of the map, and it is mostly symmetrical. As for the stats on the map, what you're looking at here is it's an outdoor map, as noted. The blocking represents nearly a quarter of the map, which is pretty impressive. In fact, it is about a quarter of the map, plus the hinderings and the rest of it. So yeah, about a quarter of the map is blocking terrain, which is quite a lot. And when you look at the edges, that amount increases to the better part of more than a third. So what that basically means is that there's very likely to be some blocking in the way depending upon where you're trying to draw your lines. Even upper elevation to upper elevation is not always easy because of the way that they've placed out those individual little squares. There are lots of bits of elevation, and there are just as many ways to get up and down across the elevation as there are edges of that elevation. So a lot of cases, it's hard to kind of stand and shoot. You'll very often be in the line of fire of somebody. Well, you're always in the line of fire. I guess I should say you're in the line of someone's running up to get into your face. And otherwise, both teams start on the upper elevation. They can go down to the courtyard if they wish to, or they can circumvent it. What you see is what you get on the map. Other than that, it is a perfectly symmetrical map, which is to say that the two sides are exactly the same as far as their layout of terrain is concerned. Let's start with you, Jason. I mean, this is your character's home. What do you think about the map and its uses?
Well,
Can I just ask one question before you jump into it, because it could matter?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did the Latvian pogs actually have the keyword?
Negative.
So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. That being what it is, this map actually isn't bad for characters like one-man army teams. There's a lot of places where you can kind of isolate yourself safely, stick and move to where you want to be, and especially if they fly. So very specifically, this map works for Doctor Doom in addition to being functional for Doctor Doom as a single character. And if you are looking to play it a little bit more safe, the ability to use the elevated terrain, or the elevations as they are, is useful. It's not a map that's, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. It's more along the lines of the metal arena with more blocking, I think. And so if you can use the metal arena but think it's too wide open, this is the other direction where you get a lot of the same that you get out of metal arena, but also the ability to cut off lines of fire to your characters. Now again, I think we've run into this, or we've talked about this before, where because this is an outdoor map, you can do that thing where you can get a colossal character, break a piece in the middle, stick a little guy who's got hypersonic, and safely careen them in and out if they fly or
ultrahumanite
ultrahumanite in there, and just watch him go, all right, well, I live here now and I'm mind controlling everybody. So all that put aside, it is I'm gonna now move to the constellation and how much of a massive difference it makes for the Doctor Doom. It is so tailor-made for him. I mean, we already know his leadership works for himself, but when you increase the chance of removing an action token from your one character on your team from 1 in 3 to 50-50, it becomes more noticeable. And even the constellation, even though you're only running at a 1 in 3, that next turn where the third one might not kind of hit, but you need that action token off of the character, you got it. When you need it, it's there, and it can really help the flow for a character like Doctor Doom. That said, it is still good for characters with leadership. Leadership is one of the best powers in the game nowadays. It's upgraded from it's a pretty neat, useful power to gotta have this power now. And because of that, the constellation is useful on more than just teams with Doctor Doom, and the constellation again works fantastically even if you're not using your map that one time. Just think of all those times you've looked at it and said, I need this leadership role, and you can turn around and go, oh, you know what, I got this leadership role. So yeah,
especially when you've got characters that have some kind of special trigger off leadership. I mean, there's any number of them out there. A lot of people will probably bring up Exodus because he's really quite potent in that respect, but there are lots of different figures that have some kind of bonus when they succeed at leadership, and knowing that that's in your back pocket can probably create some interesting play scenarios that I haven't thought of myself yet, but I'm sure someone will. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah.
Man, you just made me want to start looking up leadership stuff. Maybe you want to do that? Will I go or vice versa?
I mean, I was thinking of the Sheriff Wonder Woman and her on
Mhm.
theme teams, like just popping off the leadership once because you needed it is enough to think,
Yeah.
because she gives what, +1 attack, +1 defense to all characters with the shared keyword with her.
Yeah. If you're gonna mention a retiring character, I'm gonna make the
I mean,
obvious Earth X Cap reference.
she's still
Yeah.
got 2 months left.
Does
Yeah,
she? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's fair.
because rotation happens in July, right? Oh, month and a half. Sorry, month and a half.
Yeah.
There's not. I don't have a lot to add about the actual map itself. I do think that it's interesting. Again, it's so easy to look at it and kind of not realize how many of those individual little bits of blocking can get in the way of trying to see things. It's not the easiest map to place down special objects if your intention is to TK them. It is possible though, so it's not as though there are no lines. It just means you know exactly where your opponent is going to place their stuff, which may or may not be something that is of value to you or something you can exploit in the game. It's not an easy map to get any kind of stealth protection on, so bring your heavy objects to stand on and get ready to blow out some of those pillars. But even then, you know, you'll be in hindering, but you'll be at the edges of the elevation. So watch out for anyone who can see around it. Other than that, I do quite enjoy the fact that the way it's constructed, you can go down to the courtyard and just not be at complete mercy of getting shot to death. You can kind of take the long way around, but I do think that the person with the high ground and the reach is going to be at a pretty substantial advantage. And other than that, it's not as wide open a map as you think, because I think that the areas where you're going to be getting most of the action happening are not the areas that are wide open. What you mostly see, it's very easy to look at this huge swath here along the right-hand side of the map that is all wide open and see a mostly open map. But the reality is you're probably not going there unless you absolutely need to, because your opponent has some kind of reach advantage on you or range advantage on you. And even so, you'll only be able to get so far in that area before you're going to have to clear the space and they're going to get their shots. So I think that the real a lot of the fight is going to probably take place in the upper areas if your opponent can force that on you. So it's not going to be as clear as it seems. And each of these little areas is not so easy to get around if you've got some well-placed people tying up the vicinity. So it's going to be an interesting little map in that respect. It's a nice balance. It's not completely locked down from the perspective that one character standing in one place can stop anyone getting by. But if you take a look at this little area here, anyone who doesn't ignore hindering has to go this way. If you've got somebody in this row, say right in this square, they're pretty well protected from getting shot, but there's just no way to get around them while you're up top. You're going to have to go down below if you don't ignore hindering when you move. So it's worth thinking about.
Also worth noting, when you pointed out that big, long line of wide open space, it's not easy to get to.
No.
When Tom points out it's all the way over there, you got to look at where the starting line areas are. Like, they're pushed 6 squares from one side, and there are 2 squares off of the other side. So it's quite a reach to get there. You got to fly or use phasing, and you don't want to be there. So it's not worth the effort.
I mean, it's also one where maybe the boxing ring is more obtrusive than the wrestling ring is, and the boxing ring is retiring. Given that this area up here is 5 feet wide, you can fit a ring up here, and so if it were boxing, it would be particularly obtrusive. Even with WWE, it's a good way of trying to funnel the action in that general direction. But by the same token, this is also 5 feet wide, so it's 6 feet across, which I think is a nice little piece of design. You can't just put a ring down here and completely clear this out, but you can clear an awful lot of space here if you have a well-placed ring. That's probably worth noting.
I think I like the ring in the upper section more, just because if they want to be in that area, you're going to punch them, you're going to have access to ropes for stuff. Whereas if they want to go on the bottom, they're just not shooting you, they're not punching you, sort of thing. So
right,
there's a lot of good stuff there. As far as characters with interesting leadership effects go, there's a bunch of different generating ones, like the Nick Fury from Captain America and the Avengers makes the Shield agents, which are very good figures. You have Jason knows the Sentinel generators very well. Those are very strong, potentially. You have less interesting, you have the ones, the hired flunkies and the suited henchmen. which are not nothing, but whatever. And some other random ones. Most notable is probably Prez. There are some others, but nothing.
True.
But not that many that are terribly interesting.
What about Red Skull?
Yes, he was one on the list as well, and I know PJ had mentioned trying to make something work with him. I don't know. He feels really expensive.
Well, I mean, I think I was saying on the show a few weeks ago that I played against someone who had the Red Skull with a couple of Ensign Crushers, and who just couldn't miss at leadership. And at that point, he also had like a 14 attack mind control. So it was a guaranteed win. It was just a question of whether that alone is enough to win you the match, in conjunction, of course, with the fact that Red Skull is a pretty thick dial and a big opening defense and pulse wave. There are more things to it, but it still is a big investment. He's better played without his Cosmic Cube, oddly.
Well, I think that the Koba Cube for improved targeting elevated can do some stuff on this map.
Yep.
Or the random tokens, if you're trying to advance and then he mind controls you and then gives you a second token, you're just like, well, I attacked my own characters and I'm pushed. But as far as I think you pretty much covered the location. And I've played against Dr. Doom a bunch in competitive, and he is definitely something. There's certainly a couple of characters that can deal with him more effectively, but in addition to just getting the protected outwit and the token, improved targeting hindering is kind of a big thing now. And it's just like, well, I have a stealth. Oh, wait. And yeah, just Dr. Doom going every turn on a 50. Well, 2 chances at a 50-50 is a hell of a thing. Starting literally at starting the game and deploying, I find it interesting that it's a very easy map to expand on. Like I'm seeing these days a lot of Wendigo swarms, and you can start to expand only placing 4 2x2s in the starting area. So yeah, I played against Aaron Morgan, and he had basically that kind of team, and then he had the Captain America set Chase, Doctor Strange with the portal marker. So these Wendigos are starting 2 up already, and they were getting a 6 movement swing plus their giant reach. So that was quite scary, and just Wendigos are seemingly pretty good right now. Yeah, the terrain is kind of weird for the lines of fire. I feel like if you have something that's good for not being shot at, like the Widows or some other WWE or some other stuff, it's interesting to be able to creep up on the side, and then you can kind of body block in addition to having your stealth, depending on what it is. And it'll be harder for them to deal with. Or, I don't know what teams are going to want to go on the pit, really, outside of the aforementioned hypersonic stuff, or I don't know, maybe if they're more close combat focused, you can send your long-range Colossal there. I don't quite know what that's going to be on that part of the map, but it's also not a bad Tri-Sentinel map. If you want to be on the lower part, you can't be... There's really only so many spheres you can be not next to blocking, while also being reasonably okay to traverse with your other characters. And being able to funnel them like that might just be better than blocking up their movement entirely, because if they want to advance and do stuff, you should be able to do stuff to them. And given the areas where they're going to want to be to deal with, to interact with you, it'll probably be pretty easy to just send or as a free action from the stairs, use a Zero Ringer, some free barrier, and then in addition to potentially blocking off their paths, because it's going to be a very funneled route that they're going to want to take, you can do some really obnoxious stuff there. So yeah, I don't know if any particular team is going to want the terrain as much. Maybe if we get some random a character that has the elevated Kansas stealth sort of thing. I don't think we have any of that right now, but you never know. Or I can definitely see some merit to wrestlers for sure, especially if we get some more reversal and other ways to start obstructing movement and whatnot. Or maybe even the new Joker clones, because they have the stealth plasticity and they can basically hide in that side portion of hindering. So that's really going to obstruct your movement. And yeah, if you're funneling your opponent where you want them to go, then you're probably in a good position. So yeah, the location, well, I think it's just one of the best locations they've made in a while, but you also don't necessarily mind losing, just because an absolutely guaranteed leadership is just an amazing thing to have in your back pocket. Like that
Absolutely.
can theoretically change a whole game.
I mean, it's another one. As I said last week, I'll reiterate again today. I like it when they create constellations that are of value in and of themselves. And this is absolutely one. This is one of the best balances in some way, because even if you were to put this onto a non-themed team in the expectation of getting the constellation to try to trigger off an effect, it's not a situation where you're likely, depending upon your team composition, of course, going to be disappointed if you do win map, since you still are getting a leadership boost. It's just not exactly maybe the one you're building for. So I think it works both ways, and it's a good, well-designed, balanced map. Let's move on. We're going to talk next about Reed's Lab. This is an indoor map. This one has a location bonus called Unstable Molecules, which is following the theme of the Doom Castle. Plus 5 points or 0 points if every character on your starting force, minimum 4, has the Fantastic 4 keyword. So here we do have a minimum, but by the same token, we do have also that it doesn't have to be exactly 4, as some other things are triggered at. So you can theoretically have more than 4 and still get the benefit of this particular map. Now, one quick thing I would point out before I actually start describing the bonus is, just because it's not especially clear in the way in which it appears in this map, is that you might be inclined to look at the screen and think that the orange squares are the only ones triggering the effect that I'll be describing here, but that's not the case. It's actually everything within the square. Yeah. So the hindering is indicated so as to be able to make it clear what's hindering and what isn't, and the orange is there to help you sort of as a visual reminder of what the squares are. But in fact, anytime you're within those 5x5, perfectly boxing ring shaped sized areas, you'll be able to take advantage of the location bonus. Yeah. And that location bonus is as follows.
So just before you get into it, I just want to point out that on the map they do properly outline all the squares properly. So it's very clear if you actually look on the map here as opposed to this grid form here.
Right. And just so that I'm clear, Jason, those are windows, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, just making sure, because of the conversation we had last week where we were not exactly sure what we were looking at. Yeah. All right, so location bonus. When a friendly character in a numbered orange zone attacks or is attacked, modify their corresponding combat value by +1. If they're in zone number 1, it's attack. In zone number 2, it's range. In zone number 3, it's defense. And in zone number 4, it's damage. If that character is named Mr. Fantastic, you can choose which combat value except speed to modify. So if it's Mr. Fantastic inside the zone, then you'll be able to get a bonus of your choice. Otherwise, you're going to get a bonus based on the zone that you're heading towards. The constellation for this one is, at the beginning of the game, generate 4 past experiment markers anywhere on the map, not within 4 squares of a starting area. Friendly characters occupying those markers modify attack +1. So quite a different constellation, although I suppose maybe as close as they could have come to mirroring this particular effect in a constellation setting. But again, a distinct feature. You basically have 4 areas where you're going to get a +1 attack, and if you know the terrain well enough or know your deployment well enough that you can reasonably predict that, then maybe you can use that to your advantage. Otherwise, when you do get the bonus, then depending upon where in the map you want to end up, you're going to get some kind of a bonus for being there. Looking at the map itself, you've got the standard blocking corners, again, where you have the description of the location bonus. But otherwise, it's a blocking-free map. That is to say, true blocking. There are a few walls, specifically around the starting areas. This is one of the corner-to-corner maps, which are rarer, and since Genosha is cycling out, then it's nice to see another one filling in its space. And in both cases, your corner is going to be fully walled in from direct views from the opposing starting area. There's no line you can draw from one starting zone to the next, even if even if you did have some way of getting there, regardless of the range. As for the actual pods themselves, they are glass walls. These are rarely seen, but remember, glass is the one that you can shoot through, and it blows up when you do, but you cannot walk through. So you have to use the doorways, at least until such time as you've blown out the glass. And this is a map with a fair amount of hindering to begin with, and boy, is there ever going to be a lot of hindering once you start breaking glass, since that will generate hindering on either side of the breakage, meaning that this fairly modestly hindered map as it is will quickly become a very heavily hindered one if that is what you want and that's what you're building towards. As for stats, you can see that the clear terrain takes up the majority, but as noted, that could be a matter of time. And as far as the edges are concerned, there's lots of hindered edges along the way, just because of the way in which the hindering is laid out. There's a lot of individual squares or small sections, meaning that there's lots of lines that are going to be hard to draw without going through some kind of hindering, despite the fact that the hindering to start with isn't that much, and you'll likely be creating more when you make the shot. So there's a lot to think about. I've mentioned hindering quite a bit because this is a map that is perhaps more hindered than it seems at first glance for all the reasons I've just described. It's also an interesting one insofar as the fact that you really are safe from being visible from your opposing starting area off the top. And the corner-to-corner maps always change the flow of things. As for the location bonus itself, I think it's going to be difficult to use fully to your advantage. I describe this as moderately symmetrical. It's not really symmetrical at all from the perspective of the location bonus, but the actual layout of the map is quite symmetrical, so I kind of chose the midway point between the two. Remembering, though, that if you do win map and you get the bonus, then whatever your opponent most wants to deny you, they'll be able to choose the edge or the end of the map that allows them to do so. So it's an interesting map. I suspect that it is a map that requires quite a bit of deep thinking, and at the moment I've only had some surface level thoughts. But Jay, what are your surface level thoughts?
The first thing I have to say is that I don't know if people know this in general, but they got rid of the when windows are shot through, they're blown up thing.
So
they did?
See through them?
Yes, you still see through them, but you don't automatically destroy them.
Well,
and I believe you don't even destroy them with improved targeting that destroys blocking.
Reed, we need to talk about your office setup.
Yeah,
you got to wonder what kind of a window that really is.
Yeah, I did make sure to check all the rules documents. I'm not spreading misinformation, but yeah.
Huh. Wow, that's good to know.
I don't think that changes a great deal of what you were going for.
Well, it changes up the hindering piece of it. This is the sort of map where, I always like a map where you can kind of create more hindering to easily create more hindering to use to your advantage. But even without it, then you're right. It doesn't hugely change things. It does, however, mean that it's a lot easier to shoot than to get around when you're not removing the impediment in so doing. So that's pretty meaningful.
Unfortunately, you can't set up shots to. Yeah, it's also worth knowing that that windows are walls for some reason. So that can matter a lot these days. The location is interesting in that you did mention what I wanted to say with your opponent getting to make that decision. And I was going to say it's kind of cool that if you're playing the right team, they have to make a bad decision on what side to give you. Like if you have an Alpha Strike team, they have to decide between, do you get a better attack value on your Alpha or do you get a defense boost after you've gone for the Alpha? But the only problem with that is that the terrain on the map is identical, so it's not even like it makes a difference there. So the applications of forcing your opponent to make decisions is a bit limited. So it would have been nice if, in addition to the different zones, there's also some terrain to mix it up. This kind of feels like another map of I don't know what I want to play with it in particular. And I don't really know what team you're playing where you can hole up immediately and get a win outside of some specific POG generation, I suppose. I don't know. Like Earth-X Iron Man doesn't have amazing POGs for that on his own without the location. And I'm sure there are other POG makers that I'm forgetting, but it just doesn't seem like... I don't know... Yeah, I guess I don't know how you're approaching a game where you want to take advantage of the walls going on outside of I really want to protect my colossals, but also have an otherwise kind of clear map for everything else. So if you have somehow the single square barrier. Well, I guess if you have a character with 0, you can constantly be plugging up that hole in the starting area to make sure that you're well protected. And it would be cool if we had any of those. I don't think we have any of the range plasticity sort of characters anymore, unless I'm forgetting something. Yeah, I didn't think so.
There is actually something that it's not a full-on plasticity. It's a breakaway effect, but I can't remember now what I was looking at the other day. Anyway,
there's a Renee
Poison Ivy,
Montoya
wasn't
that
there?
does that. Yeah, I think Renee Montoya from Batman.
Renee Montoya was the one. I
Says
was
you have
looking
to
at.
break
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
I guess it's actually could be an interesting map for Reed because he gets giant reach based on the shape change roll. So if he gets giant reach 6 and they're not able to deal with it, that's interesting. And I guess now that I think about it, if you can somehow make attacks and then retreat into your starting area, you probably could be able to set it up where they physically cannot actually retaliate on you. So that could be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I guess an astronomer team or astronomer could be interesting because there's outside of the starting area, there's just nothing blocking lines of fire. So if they want to engage at all, like if they leave their starting area at all, they're liable to get blasted. So that could be something.
I would certainly suggest that maybe, like, I don't know that I'm going to quote individual pieces. I just think, generally speaking, this is a weird map in so much as it is completely wide open. Like, if you ignored hindering, you would basically look at everything outside the starting rooms as a completely wide open map for shooting only. Again, that is the nature of glass walls, but I'm so used to breaking them when you shoot through them that you are creating impediments and you're opening up ways of people getting through. But if that's no longer the case, then this is absolutely a map where you can kill the range game as long as you've got some people to run out front and do some tie-up or hold down passes. You're really forcing your opponent to get around, and you're potentially shooting them like fish in a barrel if you do. So I don't know how much that synchronizes with the location bonus, but just as an effect that gives an advantage to a certain type of team, I think that a run and gun type of a team could go very well on a map like this.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call the bonus inconsequential, but it just kind of feels like, if anything, it's kind of the opposite of something. Well, I guess the opposite of Doom's Castle, where you care about the terrain more. And I guess if you're going to want to be on the map anyway, why not? Sort of thing.
Yeah. I honestly, this is I can hardly imagine building for either the constellation or the map bonus myself. But Jason, what do you think? Or what are we missing?
The future? I mean, what does the next big Fantastic Four team look like? I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. And if there is something that, kind of stands out and makes me go, huh, then I might revisit this map. But like you just said, I can't foresee myself building with this map in mind for a lot of teams, short of whatever that future Fantastic Four team that happens to have all the cool stuff that Fantastic Four keyword is going to give it. So, like, I got nothing else to add on top of what you guys said. You kind of nailed all my points on the head. I just wanted to add that, like, until I see what the future of the Fantastic Four keyword is, I think there needs to be a little bit more. Just, again, having watched The Thing get shot to death before, and that's not even on this map, I do not foresee it being the best kind of position for what we have available to us right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking off the top of my head, I can't think of any Fantastic Four characters that would have huge range, really. I mean, unless I'm forgetting something, but
some storms, they might make a storm Fantastic Four keyworded.
Yeah, they confirmed Black Panther, but not her. So I'm assuming that she could be in. I don't know.
She could be. Who knows, right?
I guess in a way, I don't know that you need it's so much a big range. I think in some ways it's more important to be sort of a run and gun piece. So again, I think a Human Torch would be perfectly good on this. And I think there's any number of other characters, as long as they've got some range. I think the mobility is probably going to be the priority, because you kind of get up in there and then have a body blocker and one of your routes, and that kind of locks down all the other routes to you, and then you can move back and run and gun your way back over as your opponent tries to close the gap and stuff. Big range is good; it always helps, but I think mobile range is also applicable.
Yeah. Now that I start thinking about it, this seems like a really obnoxious layering map, just because you could potentially put your opponent in some really annoying to come out of holes sort of thing, just with all the blocking for movement sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a fun little map, and I look forward to seeing what we can do with it.
I also only noted specifically Fantastic Four keyword because it comes at no cost to them.
Yeah, that's very reasonable to think that.
So let's move on to the next one, which is no location bonus here. We just have the Testing Grounds. Testing Grounds is an outdoor map, and what you see is what you get, with an awful lot of scattered blocking terrain, along with a very little bit of hindering, but as we'll talk about, some very specifically placed hindering, and a center section of elevated, which is a perfect square, 4x4, so not perfectly sized to put a ring down. You have to put it on either side of it. And every single edge of that elevated is a way up or a way down. So not a lot of places where no places at all, in fact, where you can stand and shoot and not be a potential target of having somebody running up and punching you or shooting back. But all the same, I don't. I'll get into some of the stats, and I will let you know my thoughts briefly before I hand it over. It's a mostly clear terrain, and most of the terrain that isn't clear is blocking. A little bit of hindering. There's a pretty big disproportion between the percentage of the map which is blocking terrain and the percentage of the map's edges which are blocked edges. The edges are much higher, and that is because of the fact that the blocking is not perhaps ironically in blocks, but rather a whole lot of individually scattered pieces. And I'll be honest, I really like this map for that very reason. You'll notice that it is designed in such a way that there is no way to kind of take the center route through if you don't ignore elevated or hindering terrain and not have to stop somewhere. I mean, I guess no. Technically, everybody ignores elevated, so moot point there. Yeah. But the point is, if you start here and try to head this way, you're going to have to stop. If you head this way, unless you ignore hindering. And so even though there's only 15 squares of hindering on the whole map, they do a really successful job of cutting off your lines so that you have to go straight across or you have to take the extreme long way around. And I think that's an interesting little map choice. I actually really like this map. It's a particular favorite, even though there's not a lot to say about it. I don't know. Jason, what do you have to say about it?
Aside from what you said, it's very pretty. It's a big old portal. It is an outdoor map, which means I don't know if you have that neat little effect you have for Colossals on this one, but this is a white map for Colossals for the most part, with maybe a couple Tetris pieces of hindering terrain. It's both their nightmare. It's their nightmare if they don't want to be shooting, or if they don't want to be in the firefight, and it is their dream if they are a long range Colossal, because there's just nothing there in their way, really. I mean, unless you have stealth, the Colossal is going to find you. And if you're playing with a ranged Colossal, odds are in favor that you found a way to ignore hindering anyway, or they do ignore hindering. So not really a big issue. So like you said, it's hard to move around if you don't fly or ignore hindering terrain if you want to move strategically. If you don't care about moving strategically, you do have to Leroy Jenkins your way through the center. So I hope you had chicken.
Although to be fair, I guess the counter argument against that is that if you're not against a bunch of Colossals, you can also head for the center and stop short of the edge. Yes. And although you won't be able to see them, they won't see you either. So that'll kind of force a decision on your opponent.
Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, I like it. It looks really cool. It's not it's not like this is the kryptonite to a certain type of team map. It's a good map. Kind of like when I turned to you in that one tournament and I said, Tom, we're going to play a game of Heroclix, and played a map that was bad for both of our teams.
I remember.
This could technically be a map that's bad for both teams or fine for both teams. And I don't see it necessarily being like the kryptonite to a whole lot of teams. Range teams are going, like non-colossal range teams, are going to have a bit of a hard time going through that center or going around. So I do have to kind of point that out. It's like if you see a team that's lacking in some Colossals, but they seem to be heavy on the range, they're going to have a hard time with this map. They're going to have a very bad day. And that's unique for an outdoor map for sure. So if you can find a way to get extra use out of the fact that it is an outdoor map while impeding that, I think that'll help as well.
Mm-hmm. Jay, what do you think?
It's just kind of a weird map. Like, outside of like what Jason said about basically wanting the game to go a certain general way, I don't know what style of team is playing this map specifically. Like, I guess if there are very specific things you see on your... I guess this feels like probably a respectable... I have one map I definitely want, like another option. Like if your map that you want is indoor, you have an outdoor, this is probably a decent middle ground sort of thing. Or if you have, primary outdoor or indoor outdoor, whatever. It just seems like a really good, I need a third map.
Well, if you've got an Alpha Strike team that can't cross the entire map in one go, I think that there's some potential for it because there's a few different zones of safety here. It depends a lot, really, on whether or not your opponent is playing like a Dark Phoenix or trying to think of other colossal-sized figures that don't have indifference. Some of the other colossals, obviously, from the X-Men set, that stuff. Like if it. That strategy won't work as well because it's outdoors, but if you're not limited by that, then it's potentially useful in that way. And it's also just a sort of there is the possibility if your team has the desire to move in pods. If you're playing a particularly large swarm and you don't want to swarm all as a cluster, then there are a few different routes you can take that can try to separate your opponent's forces and force them to a decision. So I like it. I actually think it's a map I will pack a lot of as sort of your all-purpose third option. And because of that, I think that it has some function.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot else to say. Although, to Jay's previous point, it's another one with small starting areas. So it's easy to expand.
Well, not really, just because it's completely open. Because, like, Doom had, like, the 4...
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's so much blocking.
True,
yeah,
true.
Yeah, there's not really much to say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, yeah, let's get on to the last one, which is Yancy Street. So Yancy Street is perhaps the most... all-purpose generic over these maps insofar as it's a good old-fashioned, it's got some blocking, it's got some elevated, it's got some hindering, and it's got some walls. This could be any map, this could be any set. It is an outdoor map, and it is not, like, unless this is a misprint, and you've got it in front of you there, Jason, the walled-in area is not, in fact, an indoor area that's missing the yellow border, is it? Is it in fact, an outdoor area?
It is, in fact, an outdoor area. It's painted up as a construction area.
Okay, so that is one interesting feature. You don't see a lot of outdoor maps with walled-in areas that aren't also indoors. So, walls you can see over don't come up as often as you might think. Other than that, what you see is what you get because there is no location bonus here. There's nothing special to be noted here. You've got a couple of high towers of elevator on either side, as well as about half the set map comes out the first 4 squares from the side as predominantly elevated terrain, but they are separated. As noted, you've got the walled-in area with the outdoor walls, and only a spattering of hindering, so not a great map if you're trying to hide your approach, unless you're trying to blow out some walls to do so. Not a lot to say besides the stats on this one. It is mostly clear. It is the most clear of all the maps that we've seen so far, although that is a slightly misleading metric because there is as much elevated as there is. And as far as edges are concerned, about 3/4 of the edges are going to be clear, and then the other ones have some spattering of different terrain types. Like I said, this is the most all-purpose of them all. Jay, what do you think?
Before Jay starts, I do want to add a nice little touch that they added to the map. There's skirmish numbers on them. So if you're actually playing in the skirmish format and you're rolling the numbers, you don't have to figure out where all the numbers are. They're actually there on the map, which is super, super convenient.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it seems like an appropriate map for a skirmish. I guess I'm very glad that all the 4x2 special terrain blocking ones are retiring, because that would be incredibly obnoxious with the hypersonic hit and run. Otherwise, yeah, it's I think it's a reasonable amount of open, but also just enough as far as the elevated and as far as like other stuff like that goes. Like, This feels, outside of the hindering, it feels like it reminds me kind of the gamma range from Hulk, in that there was just a little bit of everything and just enough of everything.
Or like Gorn Fight is another one that makes me think of that.
Sure, yeah. And hindering the starting areas is cool, although unfortunately not mirrored. So if your opponent wants it, your opponent will get it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't quite know what particularly wants to play this outside of a generally well balanced team that can do certain things, and also like you mentioned with the other map, probably a good area to deploy with your move a little bit up for your alpha strike and then go to the rest of the way, sort of thing. Because I mean, no matter what your opponent has, like unless they have a colossal that's somehow shooting a million squares away, if they can see past elevated, you can go behind the blocking, or if they see through all the blocking, you can go behind the elevated. So outside of needing stealth, but even then, there's so much free smoke cloud now that it shouldn't matter. But yeah, there should be just about anything to cover the approach. But at the same time, nothing really that would make it so unbalanced as far as taking the lead and then having a good place to run, which kind of feels like that could be how the game can be going with needing to KO actual main force figures. So yeah, this is just an all-around very respectable map. Nothing especially special, but also just a pretty unique set or just terrain. I couldn't really tell you if we've ever gotten something quite like this, or the last time we did, with just this huge open area, but also like just enough of everything to really satisfy any need for the most part.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that it is a skirmish map, and as Jason pointed out, because it feels like a very good one for that. At least my sense of the set of that particular setup is, it's got that little bit of everything. It's like the old junkyard map, but a lot less restrictive. Jason, what do you think?
I don't think I have anything to add to what you guys have. The way I'm looking at this is a map that was designed not for the three of us to be really in depth talking about on a show like this. This is more for a couple buds having a couple beers. Let's throw down and have a game. Or a couple buds want to play some skirmish. Here's a map that we're having some wobbly pops, and we don't have to do a whole lot of thinking because the numbers are there for us. And so like I don't kind of see myself picking this map in my pool most of the time. But it's one of those maps that's like not intended to be used with winning in mind. It's more or less to be played with playing in mind. If I actually had this starter set and I had brand new players learning how to play Heroclix, I'd actually probably start them specifically on this map out of all the 4 maps. And be like, they'd ask what those numbers mean. I'd tell them to ignore the numbers, and I would either lead them with this or Testing Ground, because I think these are the ideal starter set maps in the package when it comes down to it. So, it's not much to sing the praises of, but it's a cool map.
Well, and it also does, like you're alluding to something that is applicable to new players, but honestly, it has I think a place in strategic play as well, which is, I mean, we can't all be Jay Solomon and just know everything about Heroclix and know what we're facing and what it does. I will often, and I expect after retirement this will be especially true. I really think that there are times where I just don't know what my opponent's team does. Maybe I don't know the pieces, I don't know the strategy, I assume there's a trick, but I don't see it right away. And if I'm not sure, I never mind having a map that has a little bit of everything in it so that I can try to adapt on the fly. It's the type of map that I'm always sure to bring to a sealed tournament, because you absolutely never know what you're going to come up against there or what it does. And even in a competitive tournament, every now and again, you're not sure what you're looking at. And when you're not sure what you're looking at, you don't want to, I think, go hard to any one particular direction and discover it was the wrong one. So having a nice, well-balanced map is always valuable, and this kind of serves that purpose in a number of different ways. So I think that is a fair thing to say. That if you don't know what you're facing, sometimes it's nice to try to take the map off the table, metaphorically speaking, or literally speaking, if you want to annoy your opponent, and just focus on trying to make a game of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree strongly with your last point, but for a different reason. Just because, especially now that you're focusing on getting actual figures on the map, and there's just some developments going on that I guess can make the situation of the game change on the fly. So yeah, being able to adapt to different situations is a thing. Like now we're getting a bunch of different shifting focus. Like we got some good Iron Mans. We just got the amazing Black Widows. There's a lot of generating happening. Like Jason Wingard now with all the sideline act accessible has so many pog options. There's if you randomly crit hit or crit miss, oh, that's another character that could make a humongous difference depending on what happens. So I think just having enough terrain to cover most situations can really help, especially depending on, I guess, what we see in the future, and if there's some more just really adaptable and flexible stuff. And now also, like exospecs are much better now that it's incredibly harder to deal with them. So yeah, even just with those couple examples, I'm sure there's a lot more that exist and that I'm not even thinking of that could matter just a lot for just random stuff happening. They can't necessarily be expected, or they just have so many options. You can't really plan for everything, but you can react a little bit, I guess I would say.
I'm with you. Cool. All right. Well, that's it, everybody. For the Cartographer's Corner for the week, that's 4 new maps. It's a really exciting time if we're able to, if indeed the two set starters drop on the same day. That's 8 maps in one day. That's a big injection of new terrain into the game, and I love maps. I think that maps really are a huge part of the game. I don't love it when you have maps that just completely dictate how the game will go, and I understand why that's useful from a competitive perspective, but I think that the more the merrier is always a good thing to have, and especially for new players, it's nice to have a little bit of variety in the terrain in addition to the variety of your characters. So I think there's a lot to be excited about.
And
It's 10 maps with that release day kit.
Yeah,
we still haven't seen. So yeah, it's a lot of cartography in one day. What? That might be the single biggest number of maps released in a day. And we almost had that before as well because we're supposed to release, I think, a week apart. So,
well, you're not necessarily going down to your store to buy the release day map, right?
Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, like it's being shipped. I don't know what's going to happen with those.
I guess we're going to sit there for a while.
We're going to have to figure it out there, bud.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be easy times for that. With that,
yeah, they have it.
Yeah. One thing I'm kind of looking at is, does this mean the premium maps are starting to kind of see their age? Are they going to be going away with this big injection of maps? Because I remember pointing out a couple of years ago where I was like, the premium maps aren't being rotated, and I hope they never do because they don't give us enough maps a lot of the time. Is it time for those WizKids premium maps to go away? Who knows?
So I've talked to people who seem to think that they specified Evergreen in the original announcements, but nobody seems to be able to find them. But at the same
Mandela
time,
effect.
Yeah, maybe. But given how long they have existed, it just seems like that is going to happen. And I can see that being the case because that's all of the WizKids Neoprene we have. So, yeah, maybe that's just, I don't know. There's some interesting maps. I think WizKids Office is still interesting and different enough. I don't know. I wouldn't be unhappy if they all stayed forever. They're all perfectly good maps.
Yeah. All right. That's it. Anything else we wanted to add before we start?
That's good, man.
I literally cannot think of anything.
Then it's time to move on to questions. All right. Before we move to questions, though, I want to remind everybody that we have a Patreon at patreon.com/marriedwithclicks, and it's going to be active again come June 1st. We're going to be doing some stuff with we're going to be updating. So in its current state right now, it is the old state. I hope that I can get a chance to talk to my Metal Lab guys soon, sometime this week, wink, to update some things, maybe, possibly. But we're going to be working on a new approach to the Patreon, and I hope everybody it works for everybody. I think we're going to keep a couple of things that we do have and kind of reformat, mostly for participation's sake. We'll talk about it when we do it. Anyway, so we're going to work on that in time, and in the meantime, it is time to find out what we have as far as questions are concerned. Facebook has decided that if I try to load it today, it's going to have all of the computer resources. So I'm going to try to load it on my phone, and it just seems to be a Facebook problem. There's a little bit of a love for the episode in ahead of times, but we did have one question from, speaking of Patreon, our alpha patron, Mr. Michael Fedor, in honor of Victoria Day, which was actually the holiday we had yesterday, which is why the show's on live today on Tuesday. I know, right? We're messing everything up for this.
Right.
What are the best pieces with the ruler keyword? Golden Age is acceptable. I mean, we know my answer. It's Dr. Doom. So, Tom, what's your answer?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember because I always avoided ruler. I got to think about it. Jay, you know everything.
Sorry,
off
was
the
it
top of your
single best?
He wants to know some of the best. If you want to spend all night on this, just let me know so I can go to bed.
I'm just pulling out a couple, just really notable ones that are just all fantastical, amazing. You know what? I think if I was going to do 5 in no particular order, the new Dark Side, Jason Wingard, obviously, Chase Jean Grey, also from the X-Men set, Gorilla Grodd, just because 10-point filter is a crazy thing to exist, and I had a 5th. Oh, Starro. Starro is outstanding, fantastical. More Trouble Alerts to be his Justice League slaves is going to be a thing.
Yeah, Starro is absolutely a great call for that. The title Kang the Conqueror always stands out to me, even though no one has yet to really make much headway with him, but I still think he's a cool character. If we're talking Golden, then Shredder Clone was always one that would stand out whenever I would look for those types of things. There was a Hulk that was a ruler. Wasn't it Hulk at the end?
Worldbreaker?
No, maybe.
I think also, one sec.
Yeah, I was thinking of the End Hulk.
I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Check. It is, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just also checking.
He is the ruler of the world as the last person on the world, right?
Makes sense, right?
Default.
Yes, also the Worldbreaker one.
Also Groot and Surtur.
And for what it's worth, the Prime She-Hulk from Battleworld.
Yeah, Surtur's a good one.
Lots of them out there.
I forgot. I was going to check quickly for a Golden Age one specifically.
Oh, Witch Queen LeFay, another favorite. Yeah. The Witch Queen Challenge. Never ends.
I'm up next for the Witch Queen Challenge, aren't I?
I know.
Is it me or Jay?
Excited.
Who's up next?
No thanks. I don't trust my dice.
It's not about trusting dice. It's about trusting the Witch Queen.
You all have to take the challenge. Yeah. It's just a question of who comes to New York next time we go. I mean, it's a question of when we can go. She might be retired by that point.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had to cancel a possible trip to New York. So.
Yeah. If I'm going to mention a specifically golden one, I mean, you can't not mention Goblin King. Like, he's just the thing.
Yes, the Goblin King. I love the Goblin King.
And, of course, we're all Canadian. So,
Al Jordan himself.
Yep.
All right.
He's a genie in the bottle. You can rub him the right way. Why don't I not? Oh, you know what? Discord was being a problem a little while ago, so I should double check that because I also turned off notifications on Discord a little while ago. We'll get that. We'll get that working again soon. I promise. That has to be my number one priority when we. Okay, there's nothing on the Discord.
Yeah, I thought so.
All right. So that's been the episode this week. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
It was enjoyable talking about the Fantastic Four maps. I'm really looking forward to having those in everybody's hand come May 27th.
You bet. Yeah.
And, of course, I want to thank our patrons and our sponsors of MajesticCCG.com. Check out the Apex Insiders. It's your one-stop source for all things HeroClix. There's always a lot of great brain dumps from some really good players in the game. $3 a month gets you access to the Apex Insiders, versus where you get the primo content, the really good
the creme.
The creme de la creme, and sometimes the creme de la what the heck, Jason. I'm always self-deprecating on my own articles because I think they're the worst. That said, again, Tom, thank you for being here. Jay, thank you. Guys watching live, guys watching in the archives, ladies watching live, watching in the archive. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you guys next week. And remember, get on Roll20. Get some family into the game and get some practice in, because practice will make your team better. Have a good night, everybody. All right, I'm having a very awkward moment, and people are going to hear this. I closed my music app.
Great outro.
The best outro. Quick, somebody hum the song. Wait, you guys don't know the song because you can never hear it.
Yeah, I can never hear it. It's just like a
Yeah.
beat.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong people.
All right, I think I found it. Here we go. And
Professional quality
only
podcasting.
the highest quality. I have a Patreon. I want people to pay me for this. All right.